Welcome to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit, hosted by The Roller Coaster. My name is Lucy Q. 5 years ago, the emotional turmoil of midlife turned my life into a shitstorm. To make things worse, I had no idea that my chaotic emotions were due to the roller coaster of midlife. I thought I was crazy, and I felt completely alone. I've come to realize that midlife is more than a list of symptoms that we have to endure or cure. Midlife is the beginning of our next chapters. This is our time to be heard, to live our best lives, and to fix those pesky hormones. Join me as I chat with experts and industry leaders about nutrition, bone health, hormones, mindset, healing, journaling, living life to the fullest, and yes, even sex. I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride. I was finally able to start my journaling practice back in 2018, but that was only after several failed attempts. Before I was really able to connect with journaling, I had purchased countless blank journals with high hopes of pouring myself onto their pages. Instead of spilling my words of wisdom and insight, I'd find myself sitting there just staring at blank pages, painfully trying to find something to write. That is why I created Your Journaling Journey, a quick start guide to begin your journaling practice today. Your Journaling Journey is a guided journal with daily prompts, gratitude, and affirmations. You can get your copy of Your Journaling Journey today on Amazon or check out the show notes for links. Welcome back to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit. I'm your host, Lucy Q, and joining me is Cara Moulds. Cara is a certified coach for midlife women, a retired high school teacher and administrator, fine arts photographer, and aspiring novelist. She's been happily married for 27 years, and she's on the 60-year-old high-energy, passionate, super fit, and living her best life. Welcome, Cara. How are you?
I'm great.
Cara.
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Now, I don't know about your own midlife journey, but for me, midlife just seemed to hit me out of nowhere. It was like being T-boned at an intersection. It was like, boom, all of a sudden I'm there. Can you maybe share your experiences with midlife and how that brought you to working with women?
Yes, well, it hit me too like that. I think I was 49, and I had mapped out this trajectory for my career, and that's when I was a high school administrator, and menopause started to hit, and my son was in high school, and so I had empty nest starting to, had one that was already out of the house and out of college, and then my last one was on his way out soon, so I had that hitting. And at the same time, I had this great career that I'd been working at, building my career for many years, and they were talking to me about becoming a principal, and all of a sudden it was like you said, it was a big roadblock. It kind of stopped me in my tracks because I started to think, I'm not sure I actually want to do that. Like, I was hit with the, I think the mortality of having menopause hit. And for me, at least, starting to awaken to the idea that I was moving into the crone phase of my life. And then I might only have so much time to do all these things that I have wanted to do and I've put off doing. That combined with everything else going on in my life made me reevaluate everything, and it certainly did hit me head on, and it threw me in a bit of a tailspin too, because the way I had solved all my challenges leading up to that point was not how I was going to get through my, what I would call, midlife existentialist crisis, in terms of,
I called it a meltdown.
Yeah.
And mine hit me at 44.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just out of nowhere. You suddenly start to realize all of these things. And I think up until that point, you don't realize what's going on because we're so busy
Yes.
doing everything. And then for some reason, you just kind of get that moment when you're like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. And I, not only did I go into a tailspin, I bottomed out. Did you, like, I hit rock bottom? Is that what you experienced?
Well, I pretty much um, started, I reevaluated my career to the point where, I mean, I didn't go into a major depression, but I think to some people it probably looked like that. Um, and I did just get off of my career track. I basically wound up looking for something else that I could do that felt more aligned with who I was feeling like I wanted to be at that point. I felt like I had to do something drastic because I felt like I was drowning and suffocating in what felt to me at the time like I would put on my suit to go to work, and I was behind this suit of armor, wearing a mask all day long, and like completely disconnected from myself. So that's the part that kind of, I guess, to me felt like a meltdown. I don't know how did your meltdown manifest in that way?
Mine was completely emotional. Completely emotional. And yeah, I did make some radical choices at the time that everyone around me was questioning. Some people didn't have any choice but to go along with it, my husband and kids. But ultimately, I had to go through that to get where I am now. It was, yeah, it was really hard. It was really painful. It was really confusing. Mainly because I didn't know I didn't associate what I was going through with being midlife. You know, I joke that I'm a slow learner with certain things. And I only just realized I was midlife like earlier this year. Like, not because I'm, some ego and I can't accept that I'm 49, but it just never dawned on me.
Right.
I just wasn't there. So if at 44 I had realized, okay, maybe this is midlife, and started to sort of look at those transitional things that we tend to look at that point in our life, I probably wouldn't have had such a hard time. But having such a hard time is now rooted me so passionately in, helping those women that are that were in the same situation I was, but also reaching back to better prepare other women for what they're going to encounter, because really we should be looking at what's going to happen in midlife when we're in our mid 30s. Right, when you're in the middle of the busiest of everything.
Yes.
Because you know I spoke with a nutritionalist that's part of the pod summit, and really if we're not preparing ourselves in our late 30s nutritionally, then as the hormones start to switch, that's where the brick wall comes.
It's funny that you mentioned that because without realizing it, I have always, I mean, I wasn't always super fit when I was in my 20s. I wasn't super fit, but each decade I would change my diet. Like when I hit 30, I thought, okay, I can't continue to eat like I did when I was 20. When I hit 40, I switched my diet. And so when I was going through menopause, 40, probably 48 is when it started, and into 50, into my early 50s. I had already switched to a plant-based diet that at the time was probably really heavy on soy. And after the fact, I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm just telling you my own experience, but after the fact, there's been so much research on how, because I didn't really have a lot of terrible menopausal symptoms. And I also did not gain a ton of weight like a lot of my friends did. But I think maybe that's because I had already switched to that diet, and the soy, I think I've read, it might help with those symptoms. But I completely agree with you that, and that's was not even talked about. I mean, since I'm 60, so when I was going through this, now it's been a while ago, that was not even talked about. In fact, menopause was just starting to be talked about, which was also, I feel like, a little bit weird. I think it's fantastic now that it's so out there and that there's so much information and so many women sharing their experiences. Because it was different going through it like that. So I just lucked out on the nutrition, but I completely agree with you that starting to talk about it and plan for it in your mid 30s, and just the awareness of what's coming is will make such a huge difference. Maybe women won't hit as much of a the as much of this huge, what I felt like was just being, like you said,
That bottoming
yeah,
out of
bottoming
everything.
out.
But it's funny, you say you're plant-based. I've been vegetarian for 8 years now.
Hmm.
So for most of my 40s, I've been vegetarian. I live on the ocean, so sometimes I'll eat fresh
Right.
seafood,
Hmm.
but not very often.
Hmm.
It didn't make a blind bit of difference for me.
Oh, really? So there you
Not a
go.
chance. Not a chance. No, it didn't do anything for me. And I recently opted to go on BHRT
Okay.
just because like I knew I was that far out of
Right.
whack. I've always thought I was the type of person that was ruled by my hormones anyways.
Right.
Like they've always been very dominant in my life. And I think I actually suspect that my estrogen started to drop off after I had my second.
Mm. Hmm.
And it maybe balanced out because I remember having hot flashes in my mid
Oh,
30s, but
wow.
that balanced down again once I sort of got past that. Your body is still kind of in a pregnancy phase,
Yes.
like a year after you have a baby. So once I kind of cleared a couple of years after that, it stabilized,
Hmm.
but then it started back. And I mean, my, yeah, around 45, I was chronic insomnia,
Mm.
constant hot flashes,
Oh,
everything.
wow.
It was a mess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not experience that. I experienced,
And that's the thing. That's a crazy
I will say
thing.
what I did experience, and which a lot of women don't talk about, but I'll put it out there, is like horrible sexual dryness that was awful.
Oh yeah, see, I didn't have that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like that was just, and in fact, not to TMI too much here, I had more libido than I ever
Oh,
did.
that's nice.
And it's like, but I mean, that's the weird thing is
Yes,
that I have never spoken to two women that have had it the same way.
exactly.
It's like we all have, there's these different sort of markers,
Hmm.
and some you're a 10 and
Hmm.
some you're a 0
Hmm.
and sometimes you're in between,
Right,
and it's never the same picture for any two women.
right. Which is why I really feel like it's so helpful that there's so much conversation about it now. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
women would just go to a doctor, and the doctor may or may not really know anything about it. And
Hmm.
then whatever the doctor did know might not match what you were experiencing at
May not be
all.
current. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And one of the things that I find, even if you do go to a doctor, even if you do get the proper physical care that you need, the major component that everybody is missing is that the mental, the spiritual side of everything. And I think that's the big thing that nobody really knows how to, confidently open up the conversation on.
Right. Yes. And may, maybe that's what helped me, because I've been so spiritual ever since my 20s, basically. And so all of those, my spiritual practices, I were absolutely ramped them up during this phase. And I know that you've mentioned that you do a lot of journaling, and I've certainly been journaling my most of my life, like certainly since I was 30, and probably came across Julia Cameron's morning pages. I've been doing 3 pages of morning pages every morning. Um, and that, combined with all of the spiritual seeking that I was doing, um, I think helped me a lot. But what I will say is that when this hit me and I knew that I wanted to make a career switch, because I just felt like I needed something significant to move me from what I was feeling. Um, One of the first things I did was join a spiritual, like, group coaching program that was really focused on figuring out how to feel successful for your soul. And so it was a deep dive into a lot of oneness consciousness ideas, and and just coincidentally, the group was just women. So, and we were about the same age. And so it actually just worked out, even though it wasn't intended to be that way, it really worked out to be this really fantastic small group women's circle where we were discussing these spiritual ideas that were resonating with us and that we really needed to tap into. Because one of the things I realized is that for a lot of women, at least who are, were my age and maybe still around 50, will still be going through this because we spent most of our adult lives, especially if we were like career-oriented women, pursuing ideas of success and maybe even making career choices that were based very much on what would be considered successful, based on masculine-based energy kind of, and of course, a patriarchal controlled culture. And
exactly.
And so in order to be successful in that world, a lot of us made career choices that were not maybe what we dreamed of doing when we were young girls. But as we kind of grew up in that world, it's like, well, if you want to make money, or if you want to have financial stability, or if you want to have a job that you're going to keep, or you made choices that maybe at the time weren't really aligned with your soul. And then we've spent our careers working in that world. And in order to be successful in that world, a lot of women have to tune out our emotions and our feelings. And then all of a sudden, at least for me and for most of the women that find me and work with me, they all of a sudden are realizing that they've tuned that out. And now they really, really want to reconnect with that. Like they're feeling this urgent sense of rediscovering who they are, which is why I was so excited about this pod summit, because this is really important for women who, especially the women who have spent most of their time focused in this frame of mind and this way of functioning, this busyness instead of beingness. And it's hard to even step out of that busyness and even allow yourself to be, and then explore who you are when you're not busy doing and achieving and accomplishing.
But I question if we were ever given the opportunity to truly pursue what we want. Because up until a certain point, women had a choice of being a stay-at-home mom, being a nurse, or being a teacher. And then you look at the 80s, suddenly, and that's when I was a teenager, suddenly we're told you can have it all. You can have the career, you can have the family. But if you notice, when women were going into the workplace, we were essentially wearing a feminized version of the power suit. It was like, it may have had shoulder pads, but it was, and a skirt. Male. Exactly. Yes. And so then we were forced into this career avenue where that's all about getting the titles and achieving and the awards and all of that. And I really question throughout history where women have ever been given the opportunity to truly tune in to why they're actually here. I mean, sure, there's always the element that, there's many of us that choose to be mothers, and that is part of our purpose, and that is part of, where we balance our feminine and masculine energies. But where have we ever actually been allowed to just be without somebody trying to fit us in a box?
I love that question.
It's just not, like, if you think about it, somebody's always been there trying to tell us who we can be, what we should be, what boxes to tick.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it any wonder that there seems to be this, call it uprising, of women saying, hey, no, wait a second. And more you're noticing women making the choices like you did, like I am, about really evolving your life's work into that more sort of spiritual side of things.
Well, and see, those questions that you're asking when I was going through this, and I discovered The Heroine's Journey, which was written by Maureen Murdoch. And of course, I was an English teacher before I was an administrator. And so I'd studied the Joseph Campbell Circle, Hero's Journey. And when I read through her book, part of what she talks about is exactly what you just mentioned. And for her, that is where women wind up identifying more with the father, and you become your father's daughter, and basically not being you basically cut yourself off from the feminine side, because women have not been able to be themselves. So ever.
Yeah.
And like you said, in the 80s, then we were all told that we could be superwomen. And we could have it all.
And it was almost like we were expected.
Yes, we were
expected to have the, like, it was almost looked down upon if you were at home with your kids.
Yes.
But then you pursue this career, and then you're looked down upon because you've got to take time off to, guess what? Take care of your kids.
Oh,
yeah. Imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That was the separation from the feminine, and then it moves into your identifying with the masculine, and then you find the illusory boon of success. So you're successful in this patriarchal, male-dominated world where you function from masculine energy, and then it's illusory, because all of a sudden, for many women, it's when something significant happens, menopause, empty nest syndrome, changes in career, horrible life events that make you reevaluate your life. And that's when this question winds up hitting you about, who am I and why am I doing all of this work? Because all of a sudden you realize it's not aligned with who you are. And so the process of her heroine's journey is that women then have to go through this kind of like descent into back to the goddess, to kind of remember who we are, when, as you've said, we've never been allowed to figure it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was familiar with the hero's journey,
mm-hmm.
but that is the first time I think I've heard reference. What did you say the author was again?
Maureen Murdoch. And you know what's so interesting to me is when I found this book, I was 50, and the book had been out of print for 20 years. And that shocked me, because it resonated with me. It resonated with every woman who I talked to, who was going through this. And I would explain this to them, and they would say, oh my God, that it makes me feel better, because what frequently happened is they would go through this and they would feel like, I can't even talk about this to anybody. And especially I can't talk about this to people at work, because they'll all think I'm crazy.
That was the thing. Yeah.
They'll think I'm crazy. I have this perfect life that everybody else has been striving for. And now I'm questioning what's wrong with me, because I'm not happy with it. And I'm not sure I want it anymore. And there must be something culturally right now, because I've lent this book out so many times that when I went to go reorder another one, it's now been republished in a 30th anniversary edition recently.
Well, I'm definitely going to get it, because I've been trying to, I'm not ready to do it yet, but I've been trying to write sort of about my experiences and relate it back to the hero's journey. And I was trying to figure out all the pieces. And being the mother of 2 sons, I'm quite familiar with the Star Wars stories and how that's the hero's journey. And, I was trying to fit it into all of that. But as soon as you talked about it being the heroine's journey and, that relating it back to the energies, I'm like, that's exactly it. Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And then it's you sort of get to the point where you're returning to then share what you've learned. Yeah. And I think more and more women are getting on that and acknowledging it. They may still be in that really, I'm confused, I have no idea what's going on. And that's why I am working my damnedest to get this message out there, because I think we have a hell of a lot to offer collectively as women. It's been underrepresented for decades, because we've always been forced into that, masculine energy way of doing things, that it's like, I'm just ready. It's just like, okay, boys, hold my beer, because here we come.
Yes, well, you will absolutely love this book. It will resonate with you because, and one of the things she talks about is it's not going to be as clear cut as the hero's journey is, because so much of it for women is it's kind of cyclical, and you might go forward a little bit and back a little bit, but the big picture is after you have this descent to the goddess, then you feel this urgent yearning to reconnect to the feminine, and a lot of that is like desiring creativity and spirituality and ways to tap back into your inner knowing and your body spirit connection, which a lot of us have shut down. And then there's the healing the mother-daughter split. So maybe not even literally your own mother, but the idea of valuing feminine intelligence and energy and the way of functioning in that from that space, and then integrating the masculine and the feminine at the end of the circle. So yeah, you are absolutely going to love this. And as I said, most of the women who wind up coming to me because they are in that spot where they are suddenly having this illusory boon of success, and they are questioning whether or not they're even happy with everything they've accomplished. Once I explain this to them, it's like a weight has been lifted, because you don't feel, first of all, you don't feel alone, and you also realize that it's kind of normal based on the experiences we've had.
And there is that call to have more feminine energy, and by absolutely no means do I mean, and that's the thing that people have to understand, is that we all have, regardless of whatever gender you identify as, we all have masculine and feminine energy. And it's not that one is better than the other or anything like that. It's a case of we need balance.
Yes.
And that balance is what's so desperately needed in our world right now. The pendulum has swung way too far over to the side of that masculine energy, that we need to bring back more of the balance so that we can, bring society, our world, the global landscape, whatever you want to call it, back into that center point where, where we can live more cohesively.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I mean, even the conclusion is that there has to be an integration. I mean, even in her book, there has to be an integration. But obviously, once women figure out what their real core desired feelings are, and they start to get a vision for what their soul aligned life can be and what they want to do, then yes, you can't actually move forward and create anything without a balance of masculine and feminine energy, because the masculine energy is a lot of the doing.
It's what gets stuff done.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's one of, as mothers, that's the energy that we depend on a lot of the time just to get through the day, is the schedules and the lists and the to-dos and what have you.
Yes. Yes. So I think certainly one of the things that I've really learned, and it's a process, so I think we're always working on it, but is learning how to plan, quote unquote, and take inspired action with surrendered trust. So creating things in a different way that has a more balanced masculine feminine way, rather than lists of things that I have to get done, and being focused so much on my visualized goal and shutting out anything that might happen that you can attract through feminine energies. Like, for example, even the fact the way you contacted me, I feel like was through my vision of what a goal was that I wanted, but taking inspired action but not being wedded to the way that it's going to manifest.
Or
So,
the time.
exactly, or the time. Exactly. Having surrendered trust that I take inspired action and then I allow things to come to me that are meant for me. Like that's kind of the balance between feminine and masculine planning, goal setting, manifesting.
And if I can add in there, enjoy the journey.
Yes.
It's not a race, and I think this goes back to, the career women of the 80s about, it's a competition, it's a race, you got to keep going. This leg of the journey, you're meant, at least from where I'm sitting, you're meant to sit back and go, okay, I'm going to see how this unfolds. This is interesting. And then when all of a sudden two things collide and here we are sitting in a pod summit together having this discussion, that's when you go and you go, holy frig, that's awesome.
Exactly. It's so
And
exciting.
that's the enjoyment of the journey.
Exactly. I mean, it just gives me tingles when things manifest like that. And I feel like, okay, I'm being totally supported by the universe.
Yeah, and it's funny, I'm trying to remember where I came across your name.
Isn't that interesting? Like,
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure,
yeah,
but it was meant to be.
exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Now you have put together, and I love this. I took a peek at it, and it's everything that I am. You've put together a really great gift for the participants of the Pod Summit. Can you share a little bit about what that is, Cara?
Yes. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a little sampler. So, it's the Midlife Moxie Toolkit. And it is a sampler of when I work with women, especially through all these things that we've just talked about. These are the kinds of things that I do with them because I feel like these are the steps on the journey to get to the life that like I'm all about being super vibrant and energetic and loving life. Like at 60, I love my life and I'm still like, oh, I have so many dreams and visions. And that's what I really, really want to inspire women, especially going through all of this, the quagmire of this. I want to inspire them to reconnect with that moxie and that energy and that vitality. So, what is in here is first thing is the midlife compass, which is basically a tool to help you look at all the areas of your life and figure out, okay, where do I feel stuck right now? Like which are my lowest things that I feel like if I worked on them, it would make me feel better. Because most of the women who start to go through this feel stuck. So then the next tool is the Get Unstuck Deep Questions, and these are some really really deep coaching questions that will help you figure out maybe where you're stuck and why you're stuck and how you can move forward in a small step to create some momentum and then get unstuck. The next thing is the self love journaling prompts because the other thing that really happens, I feel like, is we get stuck in this and then we start to lose our confidence and then we get imposter syndrome and then we feel like we're too old and it's like then our inner critic is constantly in our ears and so self-love becomes super important at this stage. So I have some self-love journaling prompts because I feel like journaling is super important to work through these issues because it's a process that you can do a little bit each day and it will build momentum and change your energy and your view of what you're going through. And then finally, what I'm calling midlife mantras. These are basically affirmations that if you read through them and really start to um, feel into what is being said there, and look for the evidence that it's true, which is built into like the explanations for them. Um, those are the things that I think really create like magic, momentum, and miracles in our lives. So it's a little sampler of, I hope, ways that women can start to really get some connection and move forward and experience some moxie in their midlife.
Well, I'm just going to interject here and say everything that you have in your Moxie toolkit are the very tools that I created for myself that brought me from rock bottom to where I am now. Exactly. All of those things.
Yes.
So I encourage everybody to get your copy of the Midlife Moxie Toolkit. Make sure you go to nectargrowth.com. That's nectargrowth.com. And by being a part of this Pod Summit, you are going to get the first 30 days free. But I know once you get there, you're going to want to hang out with us a bit longer because we're going to be having a hell of a lot of fun. It's an amazing community, and it is completely away from social media. I have all kinds of resources in there. More are going to be added every month. And you will be able to join into our monthly fireside chats. Now that's where you get to connect with women just like us and just like you who want to share in authentic conversations. And yes, sometimes we are even going to vent. So make sure you join us at nectargrowth.com. You can find links in the show notes, and they are going to be in your daily Pod Summit emails. I'd like to thank you, our listeners, for joining us today, and I can't wait to connect with you. And Cara, thank you so much for joining me, sharing your story and your expertise.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I'm looking forward to all of your great interviews for this Pod Summit.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby.